Good morning, goddammit, piss and vinegar day. I'm just gonna stop saying piss and vinegar day, whatever. I was just gonna say piss and vinegar, welcome back, because I don't remember a day anymore. Back in biceps, we got a Q&A, so strap in. Someone asked me a question, I'm gonna answer it. I'm gonna answer it in parts because this one's a bit of a long one. There's a lot to it, so let me just go over it. Fuck, where do we go? Oh, there it is. So first things, he said I got an excellent presentation. Context is I made a video about how frequently to do high intensity training. So he asked me a question about that. So he said, I've seen better results in my middle delts and biceps, weak body parts of mine, by not training those muscles directly as often and focusing a bit more on compound exercises more so. So this is good, good stuff. Yeah, one of the things about biceps and side delts and these muscles that sort of secondary movers in compound movements, like biceps and triceps and stuff, is they get a shit ton of indirect stimulus, and therefore you don't have to train them as much frequency. I mean, you can't, because they already get a bunch of indirect protein synthesis from doing bench presses and pull-ups and shit like that, where they're the secondary stabilized muscles, etc. So when people train them with too much frequency, like isolation of biceps and triceps at the same rate they do with these muscles that don't get as much indirect stimulus, like calves and traps, etc., they don't grow or they don't recover, and they actually go backwards, and they indirectly fuck your other muscles like chest and back and stuff. So that's cool. That's good. And that's kind of one of the things I talked about in that video. Now you're asking me a question, so I'm going to answer these sort of parts of the question one by one. As far as frequency goes, wouldn't it be better to train after you are fully recovered than risking training too soon? For example, assuming you need 48 to 72 hours after a training session, would it not be better to train one day later, like 96 hours later, than one day before, in this case 48 hours? I do completely agree that high intensity community almost irrational fear, or agrees with the irrational fear of high intensity communities overtraining. They take training very infrequently. I know guys that do three-way splits that take up to 14 days to hit the muscle body, or fucking hit the muscle. Anyway, so one by one, first things first is 48 to 72 hours is not the recovery time. That is your protein synthesis time. So good levels of protein synthesis will last 48 to 72 hours. Anything beyond that is probably excessive muscle damage. So we're not trying to recover muscle damage. Muscle damage is just a hindrance to our frequency, because muscle damage is not how we grow. Otherwise, you could train frequently as fuck, because muscle damage generally, if trained right and you don't do too much frequency and volume and intensity, should only last also around 48 to 72 hours. But effective protein synthesis of myofibrillar addition, actually increasing your myofibrillars for hypertrophy, the actual way we grow muscle, that will last about 48 to 72 hours if trained correctly. But muscle damage could take weeks to recover from if you do too much of. Tom Platz used to train fucking legs for 3 hours, every single set to failure and beyond, and then he wouldn't train for 2 weeks. Was that effective? Well, Tom Platz had the biggest fucking legs anyone's ever had, but that's partially genetics and partially, a bunch of fucking steroids. But we had probably been better off training a bit more frequently with less intensity and just minimizing the muscle damage. Abso-fucking-lutely. So really what we're looking for actually is effective levels of protein synthesis to mitigate muscle damage and maximize anabolism towards myofibrillar addition. So that's the first thing. So would it be better to err on the side of caution and go for 96 hours as opposed to, say, 72? Yeah, totally. Because then you've also got to consider your central nervous system, and that's fatigue. You've got to consider connective tissue fatigue. And then you have to take in consideration that how much muscle damage have I really done? How long is this really going to take? Well, good chance is if you've done, say, 3 to 4 sets to or close to failure for a body part in a session, it should take around 72 hours to recover from. It's 48 to 72, but maybe you just did a bit more muscle damage for whatever reason. Maybe you added a drop set there, maybe you did some higher reps that day, whatever. Maybe you just built a bit differently than other people. Then err on the side of caution, probably go for 96 hours. And that's if you're training right. If you're training like shit, then you might need longer than that. But the idea is, train as much frequency as you can. whilst keeping the intensity high enough to get full motor unit recruitment and mechanical tension. And then, yeah, probably err on the side of caution. But sure as shit, don't do what your friends are doing, which is training 14 fucking days between training. After the 72 hours of effective protein synthesis is up, you're in a cannibalism. You're shrinking. There is no in-between state. You're in anabolism or cannibalism. And so as soon as that's done, you should be training as quickly as you can to increase that anabolism within that muscle once again. Otherwise, what will happen is you take the Mike Mentzer approach and train chest every 10 days, and it will work for maybe a year, and then after a certain time, that anabolism isn't stronger than the catabolism you'll experience after that 48 to 72 hours is up. Then you spend 7 days fucking shrinking, and you stay in a maintenance because you built, 3 days worth of muscle, and then you shrink for 7 days, and now you're in this fucking weird homeostasis period where you don't realize that you now need to try to train with more frequency. And you would have been better off doing more frequency in the first place anyway, because basic mathematics. If you can get 2 effective chest days a week, that is vastly superior to 1, because you'll keep anabolism the entire time, and it's twice the gains. If you can get 104 chest days a year, it is better to get that than 42 or 52 chest days a year. So basically, yeah, absolutely. I think I paused my recording. Anyway, yeah, for sure, err on the side of caution. If you're going to train chest, probably don't do it every 72 hours. Maybe do it Monday, then Thursday. And then the Thursday session, do a bit of a back off. Do as minimal amount of muscle damage as you can, because now you've only got 3 days until Monday's chest day rolls around. Or maybe you train chest, you don't go by a weekly calendar, you just train chest every 4 days, and then you train back every 4 days, and you train legs every 4 or 5 days, or whatever it might be. But if you're going to train, chest hard, take 96 hours, and then the next session, maybe you do a bit of a back off session and just get that protein synthesis heightened, but you keep a rep or 2 in reserve, and instead of doing, instead of doing 3 or 4 sets to failure on chest, you do 1 or 2. You just do 2 sets close to failure to get that protein synthesis, and don't put too much connective tissue strain, not too much central nervous system strain, and not too much excessive muscle damage, and therefore you can train with more frequency and yield better gains. The best way to look at this really is, are you still progressively overloading? Great. Are your connective tissues feeling great? Great. Are you feeling overwhelmingly fatigued? No? Great. But the third one's not as important. A lot of times we're tired due to fucking alarm. A lot of times we're tired due to life circumstances, but connective tissues and progressive overload are undeniable. If you're not progressively overloading, then your shit you're doing is not working because you're too fatigued. If your connective tissues hurt, you're doing too much shit, and you might get injured regardless if you're progressively overloading or not, because that'll take away from your training anyway if you get injured. So yeah, definitely don't train every 14 days. That's fucking stupid. Train as frequently as you can in a high intensity context, and then yeah, once you stall out, then you train too frequently, and then back it off a little bit. But frequency absolutely needs to be counted. This is one of these old school fucking high intensity myths that you can train every 7 to 10 days, especially if you're natural. If you're natural, you don't have that heightened protein synthesis all the time from fucking 500 megs of test a week. You're gonna have to try and train with more frequency, and the likelihood is you can, because you're not overwhelmingly strong and therefore not taking as much of a brunt from the weights. You're not incline pressing 220 kilos like fucking Dorian Yates in his prime. You're probably incline pressing more like 120 kilos. Therefore, central nervous system and connective tissues are recovering quicker. Anyway, that's it for today. Peace out, bye.